Well, hello. My name is David Fromm with Americans for Prosperity. I'm a regional director and a former Illinois state director for Americans for Prosperity. And we're talking to all of you today about a topic that's really front and center in our national debate and is really crucial for our country. A lot of you have seen that the president and his allies in Congress have been pushing a so-called infrastructure bill. And I say so-called because it is packed with a lot of partisan wish list of items that they want to spend a lot of taxpayer money on. And so we have a great guest today who knows a lot about this. Is in the middle of the fight, Congressman Rodney Davis, and I'm also joined. And I'm going to throw it over to our Illinois State Director, my colleague Jason Heffley, who is our leader for the state of Illinois and has the unenviable task of restoring freedom and prosperity to the great state of Illinois.
Thanks, David. It's a real treat today. This is my first Facebook Live since joining AFP, and we get to do it with someone that I've had the honor of knowing for almost 20 years now. It's hard to believe. Congressman Rodney Davis is in his fourth term representing Illinois' 13th congressional district. It's a 14-county district that covers central and southwestern Illinois. Congressman Davis serves on the Agriculture Committee as the ranking member on the Committee on House Administration and on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, where he serves as the ranking member on the Highways and Transit Subcommittee. It is from his seat on the Transportation Committee, where he plays a key role in the infrastructure bill debate, which is the topic of our chat today. The congressman has established himself as an effective and hardworking lawmaker who was able to work with colleagues from both sides of the aisle to get things done in Washington for his constituents. Rodney and his wonderful wife, Shannon, hail from mighty Taylorville, where they have raised 3 great kids. I think one's in grad school, 2 in college.
Yep.
So with that introduction, let's get started. I don't know if you're aware, Congressman, but here in Illinois, we've been having a little fun with some of your colleagues to highlight exactly some of the problems David mentioned. We have been in front of Congressman Caston and Congresswomen Bustos and Underwood's office handing out pork sandwiches to highlight just how much special interest money is in President Biden's proposal and how little money is actually going to roads and bridges in the proposal. As you are talking to your constituents and in the fight out in Washington, what do you want your constituents to know about the proposal and what's in it? What should they be looking for as the debate continues in Washington?
Well, when you look at what President Biden is doing with a select group of senators to try and come up with what they term an infrastructure deal, there's so many sideline things going on, like Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer forcing a reconciliation process for some of their Green New Deal priorities to move forward, or at the same time as any infrastructure deal. I will tell you, I think your viewers and listeners need to know, I just don't think the Democrats know how to govern. I don't think they know how to legislate. So they will throw out an idea and then at the same time backtrack away from what their true goals are. So as we're here in the House this week, we are going to vote on a House-written, Democrat-only written, majority-driven infrastructure bill that's really what we term as the highway reauthorization on a regular basis here in the House. This bill is written and $1 out of every $2 goes toward new Green Deal priorities. We've identified about $167 billion that we could save and make any investment in true infrastructure go further by simple regulatory reforms that I offered to Chairman DeFazio, and he summarily dismissed. I mean, at some point, we hear a lot from Democrats about fuel efficiency and energy efficiency. When are they going to seriously take under consideration taxpayer dollar efficiencies when it comes to regulatory relief and when it comes to actually making any infrastructure investment in America go further? Let's build that next bridge. Let's fix that next highway instead of giving it to the engineers and the paperwork process.
Congressman, well, actually, let me say to the folks watching, we want you to make your voice heard. This is how members of Congress know what you're thinking. They're elected by you and they need to hear from you. So a little further down here on the page, you should be able to find an I volunteer link, which would allow you, if you spend about a minute going through it, it'll allow you to message your federal office holders. If you happen to live in Congressman Davis's district, he'll get a note from you too. But I mean, I can tell you from someone who worked for members of Congress for a number of years, they're very attuned and get reports every day on what their constituents are talking to them about. And you can bet that the special interests are funneling plenty of messages to members of Congress. So we need to stand up for our interests and for taxpayers' interests. So please make your voice heard by clicking on the I volunteer link. So Congressman, you know, there was a report last week, obviously, that there was a compromise between a bipartisan group of senators and the president. And then within the hour, it seemed like it was blown up by Speaker Pelosi and even some of the president's own comments. What do you think the future looks like over the next 3, 4, 5 months for the so-called infrastructure bill?
I think the Democrats will end up using what we call the reconciliation process, which is a completely partisan process, which means Democrats who, you know, we could work with and agree with on how to invest in infrastructure, they're going to be negotiating with the far left of their own party. And what we learned during tax reform and our attempt at healthcare reform when we were in the majority, you end up negotiating with folks on your own side that really have nothing to lose. They voted no on virtually everything. So voting no again would not be a problem. And you continue to move in the direction of your most extreme ideologies within your party. I think that's what will happen. Here's my prediction. And I honestly, guys, I hope I'm wrong, because I think we could come up with a good bipartisan taxpayer saving infrastructure deal if we use the initial Senate framework. But once the legislation starts getting written, the devil's in the details. And once you start to see that legislative language, I think you'll see some of these senators peel off. They won't support it. And President Biden, Leader Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, they'll throw their hands up in the air and they'll say, "We told you so. Don't work with the Republicans. We told you not to do that." They'll bring in the reconciliation process. And at that point in time, once that process begins, it becomes a race to spend trillions of dollars. They started with a $4 trillion estimate. Now we're hearing $6 trillion. I think you'll see somewhere between $4 and $6 trillion being spent, with the percentage invested in what your viewers and all of us would consider real infrastructure: roads, bridges, ports, locks and dams, airports. That'll be about 6% of that $4 trillion. And that's going to be a disaster for future generations that we've got to continue to stand up and fight against. But unfortunately, I think that's what's going to happen, guys. I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, that's what you get.
Conversation I ever had.
That's what you get when you get the B team. You know, I almost choke on calling it an infrastructure bill because it's just such a mislabeled bill because of all the other things that are packed in. But you know, for a year, I mean, we've been around Illinois congressional politics for a long time, and there's been leaders on both sides, bipartisan leaders who wrote bipartisan infrastructure bills. You know, I think of Congressman Lipinski and Congressman LaHood and so many others. And you in your own right are a ranking member on the Transportation Committee, a senior member who really knows about transportation infrastructure from in a deep way. What kind of priorities do you think we should really be focused on when we're actually talking about real infrastructure?
Well, we have to focus it on what we believe true infrastructure is. You don't have to go too far in my district or anywhere in the state of Illinois to see that we have a problem with maintaining our existing roadways. We have a problem with traffic congestion in urban areas that we can do something about. You know, I'm a supporter of transit systems, but when you have a bill that's being debated in the House today, this week, today, and tomorrow, we'll vote on it tomorrow, that sends an overwhelming higher percentage of dollars to transit agencies in more urban areas, that's a direct attack on rural America that I represent and that many of my colleagues represent. And they have a provision in this bill too, guys, that no new roadways can be built. If that's not an attack on rural America, I don't know what is. Where do you think we need new roadways to deal with safety issues, to deal with congestion issues, to deal with the problems that exist within our own communities that we represent. But that's their priorities. So when you look at what I believe true infrastructure should be, it's giving people a chance to compete for the tax dollars that are available and making sure that we have fair formulas, because every American's paying a gas tax right now at the pump. That money goes out to the federal government, and then it goes back to our states to distribute through our formulas that are set in Washington, D.C. That needs to be fair. And we need to make sure that those tax dollars, and this is my number one priority. I tried working with the majority on when they were writing this bill that we're voting on this week, again, which is not the infrastructure package that the president and the Senate's talking about, not even close. But this bill, we tried working in a bipartisan way. I tried getting my One Federal Decision Act. It would limit the amount of regulation and reviews, like environmental impact statements and studies, to 2 years. Why in the world can't you get all that done in 2 years? That would save, implementing this One Federal Decision Act, we have identified, would save and make $164 billion in this bill actually go toward construction rather than the paperwork process. Those are what the Democrats fight us on. Those are the common sense proposals that they don't want to accept. And I'm disappointed in Chairman DeFazio. I thought we could work with him. I've been extremely disappointed over the last 2 Congresses.
You know, Congressman, well, we're all Illinoisans here, and we have become the butt of national jokes, whether it's our elected officials going to jail or our dire fiscal situation here in the state of Illinois. But we did have some really promising news last year in Illinois with the graduated income tax amendment going down. I don't know if you're aware, but in 11 of 18 congressional districts, we won that graduated income tax fight. And in the 3 districts I mentioned earlier, that where we did the food truck rallies, we actually won the graduated income tax fight by more than 20 points. So it's promising that people, when given the opportunity to voice their opinion to their elected officials, are doing so in the right way. I just wondered if, what do you say to kind of your colleagues on the Hill about kind of the future of Illinois and where, the good people that you're fighting for? I feel like I know that you are a good representative and defender of your district and the state. But I've also worked on the Hill and heard those comments. So I just kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about kind of, your thoughts about our state in general and where we can go.
Well, I think we can get better. It's unfortunate that with multiple pandemic pieces of legislation that were bipartisan, and then the last one that was completely Democrat only written, they put Illinois in a good financial position when it comes to budgetary issues that have been affecting Illinois for decades. As a matter of fact, I saw the credit rating for the state went up for the first time in almost a little over 20 years. So, or close to 20 years. Don't fact check my math on this one, but somewhere around there. But that's good news. But the sheer problem we have is a lack of leadership in Illinois to continue to keep us on that path. Remember, we've had Democrats that have dominated our state General Assembly for decades. And when dollars come in, they want to, instead of find ways to save taxpayer money, they want to figure out ways to spend more of it. And Governor Pritzker is a prime example. Remember, it wasn't too long ago he was campaigning across the state saying that he would never sign a gerrymandered redistricting map. Remember that? That happens once every 10 years. That's every decade. So you only have one time every 10 years that you can do something about the so-called imbalance that he campaigned against and the gerrymandering and the politicians picking their own districts problem that he said he would fix. Well, instead of focusing on that when there was a limited amount of time to address it before the census was done and redistricting happened, instead he focused on trying to raise taxes and costs on every single Illinoisan. And as you mentioned, Jason, it failed miserably, even in Democrat-run districts. It failed in my district. It failed so many places. That's where his priorities are. Now, fast forward. Remember that promise Governor Pritzker made to never sign a redistricting map drawn by lawmakers. He broke that promise just a few weeks ago. That's what we learned to expect from Democrats in Illinois. And it's going to take some change in leadership before we get real change in Illinois.
Well, the only benefit is I live right outside the 13th district. So maybe with the new maps, when they come out, I might be represented by Congressman Davis. David?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to reach up to the suburbs where I am, but hopefully not. I want to remind all of our viewers that right now we're talking about the infrastructure bill and or the so-called infrastructure bill, and there's some real threats in here. I mean, this is packed with some terrible policy, and I think a lot of you have read about the Green New Deal elements to it, the tax hikes that are going to kill jobs, punish farmers. And I think it's so important for you to make your voice heard and make sure your member of Congress and your senators know where you stand on this. And so go down below on this page to an I Volunteer link. It'll allow you to, take about a minute. It'll allow you to submit your comments to your federal legislator and then go and post this on social media. So send it out. So if you care about stopping this, we need a multiplier effect. We need to make our voices heard and make sure that our federal representatives know we don't want more wasteful spending. We don't want to march towards socialism. We want responsible infrastructure spending that is going to really make our country better, but also not keep taking hard-earned money away from Americans. Congressman, I kind of wanted to go back to something I saw in the one I think it was the one federal decision act that you introduced. It seemed to have a lot of varied support. I mean, even organized labor was interested in getting on board and were supportive. And I think, when we talk about bipartisanship and kind of broad-based support, I mean, it's something that we believe is important to moving things forward in an effective way. But it seems something that seems kind of lost.
It is.
Why do you think it is? And how do you think we maybe regain some of that?
Well, it's going to take effort to regain it. And that's going to be the personal responsibility of Democrats who are here to be able to work with us. I helped write transportation reauthorization bills under Chairman Schuster that I would even get frustrated with him sometimes because I'm like, you're taking Democrat amendments over mine and I'm on your side. He's like, but we made a deal. I mean, that's bipartisanship. And I respect that. I miss that about Chairman Schuster and his leadership on this same committee. But what I'm seeing in Washington, guys, is a drive towards hyperpartisanship. And when the political temperature is high, and I believe it's on purpose by the Democrats who are in charge of the House, because when they keep the political temperature at such a high level, then their members are voting on politics versus policy. And they're able then to keep a 4-vote majority in line and be able to pass what they want passed. Otherwise, if they allowed the Capitol to open back up completely, if they allowed proxy voting to be put in the dustbin of history forever, as it should be, then that means somebody who's bipartisan like me can actually walk across a House floor, talk to some of my colleagues, talk about the solutions I believe are going to work, like the One Federal Decision Act and regulatory relief that could save upwards of 160 billion plus that could go towards infrastructure. And when that happens, that's when you start to get pushback from the members to leadership. They don't like that. So it's going to take us as non-leadership members of Congress to make this happen. And I just have not seen as much willingness on the Democratic side as much as I thought I would, especially, when we cut into their majority, and that wasn't supposed to happen. Remember, on election morning, you had the DCCC chair, Sherry Bustos, and Nancy Pelosi crowing about how they're going to beat me and pick up 15 to 25 seats. Well, we didn't lose a single incumbent, and we picked up 15 seats. So that small majority that they had, I thought this is a great opportunity for us to get some things done. Wide variety of factors screwed that up, but they've been exacerbating those factors and keeping that temperature high. And I think it's, again, I think it's purposeful.
Congressman, we know that you are busy and have a busy schedule fighting for your constituents out there. We want to thank you very much for taking the time this morning to talk about the infrastructure bill. As David mentioned, for those of you watching, please take a moment and take an eyeball action to let your member of Congress know how you feel about the infrastructure bill. I guess I would just close. Congressman, any final words?
Well, I just want to thank you and AFP and both you guys for what you're doing to bring attention to this. Because remember, I made that prediction earlier in the show that I think the Democrats will go at it alone. I think they'll use the reconciliation process. They need infrastructure. They need that popular title to hide their attempt at raising taxes and fees on every single American by opening up the tax code and raising taxes. And they also want to pass their Green New Deal priorities. And that will be part of that $4 to $6 trillion package that will be woefully underfunded when it comes to real, true infrastructure investment. So you guys, I've known you guys for 2 decades, and I couldn't think of 2 better fighters to be fighting in Illinois to send the same message that we're trying to send, that we're keeping up the fight out here in DC against this wasteful spending and against this process. So thank you for what you're doing. I'll take one of those pork sandwiches just because I'm hungry. Anytime you guys are around, man, you let me know.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Congressman. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.